And death is a natural part of our life's journey. So if you think of that as a natural part, we can know what we can do to anticipate. Whether we're on Fifth Avenue or whether we're on dirt floors in Zimbabwe, that looks the same at the end. And we need the same support at the end.
Hello, Nia Reelers. In this episode, we're going to face the second biggest fear of this country together. Do you know what it is? It's death. We hardly talk about death. We avoid the conversation about dying because we want to live. My guest, Suzanne O'Brien, she is an expert in end-of-life care. You know, when people hire a doula to welcome babies into the world, you know what doula means. And Suzanne, she's training people to become end-of-life doulas. She actually got this idea from volunteering in Zimbabwe. Something very useful, very practical, is to train all of us to know what to do when we encounter people, loved ones that are at the end of their journeys. This is a truly inspiring episode, even for myself. Before I bring you the interview, do you know what the #1 fear is of this country? Is public speaking. Funny enough. Welcome to New York Real again. Enjoy my episode with Suzanne O'Brien. This is New York Real. I'm Olive. Today my guest is Suzanne O'Brien. Suzanne, you're an author, speaker, and expert in end-of-life care. I am currently taking your course, your training program in level 1. I have finished 2 weeks.
Good, that's great.
I have a lot of questions for you because you're doing something that is so precious, so magical.
Thank you.
Welcome to New York Real.
Thank you for having me.
So I know that you had a book, an ebook that came out in June.
Yes.
That went #1 in the US.
Yes.
Tell us about it. What's the title?
Sure. Thank you.
What it's covered?
It's based on the training, and it's actually based on the level 1 training. It's called Creating Positive Passings. And again, we're talking about end of life. When I say creating, it's amazing because from the minute that I stepped into end-of-life care as an RN, I'm a registered nurse, I was studying what were the elements that made a positive passing and ones that were not so positive. And I have to tell you, most of them were challenging. In today's world, we're not talking about end-of-life, let alone preparing for it. So again, I titled my book Creating Positive Passings because there are certain things that we can do, and one of them is having that basic skill or knowledge of what that looks like. And so it's called Creating Positive Passings and the level 1 end-of-life doula caregiver training. And that's the course that you're taking. I have 3 levels.
Yes.
And the caregiver is very important and very significant here because most people want to be at home at end of life, but yet we don't know how to take care of them. And so I was finding that people are so petrified. It's the second strongest skill of fear in this country, that when somebody would go home on hospice care, which is end-of-life care, the family would be so fearful and they have no background of how to care for them that it was very difficult, and usually ended up with a lot of I wish I had more time, regrets not knowing, and just not a positive passing. So that's the title of the book. And to my surprise, it went #1 in this country. And then it went bestseller in the UK and Canada.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. Thank you very much. But it really, I think, says something about what people are looking for now. They're knowing that it's not working by not talking about this subject, that we're all going to get there. And so if we have a way that we can present it, and I do have beautiful stories, believe it or not, because people would say, that must be so depressing, and I can't believe you're taking workshops on that. And and yes, it's very, very hard to say goodbye to somebody that we love, absolutely. But do we know that it's an inevitable part of our life's journey? We do know that. Do we know that
undeniable?
It's undeniable. And the thing is, again, for me to see passings that are almost sacred, almost spiritual and beautiful, and studying why that family and that person had a positive one, what are the elements, what do we need to know, and so we don't end up in this room that is what I call kind of a train wreck and just all this pain and suffering. And when I talk emotional suffering, that's unending. And we're going to remember those. We're going to remember both of them, but we're going to remember that for the rest of our lives. So everyone deserves to have the best ending possible.
I remember watching an interview that you had online, and you talk about everyone when they are close to passing, when they know that they have a terminal illness, they all have the same kind of wishes and unfulfilled dreams, or someone to forgive. What are the patterns that you see? Because we don't talk about death enough. We think that if we don't talk about it, it doesn't happen.
Right. Keep it at bay. Well, that doesn't work. And I always, in my lectures, I always say, if somebody knows any different, then let me know. So it's kind of, having a little fun with it. But one thing that can be guaranteed is that at a certain point, it's going to be our time. And if it's not our time, it's going to be somebody we know. It's going to be a family member. So to bring this out, to help, I'm really trying to bring back a global community of end of life, because we're all kind of called at some level to step up and to take care of somebody, whether it's our parents or a neighbor or somebody. And sometimes it strikes people who are younger. If we have those basic skills and we're comfortable with being able to be of comfort and service to them, whatever that means, just whatever we can do for them. But people tend to run away a lot of the time, and they'll come to me and they'll say, I had a friend, they were end of life and I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. And they regret that. So I don't want that. I want to give them the tools of what you can do, and to know that this is a natural part, what they're seeing and maybe what they'll experience. And how can you offer somebody support and service at a time that might be seem that there's nothing you can do. There are things we can do, and you need to show up. I think if for us, I know that I would want to show up for somebody, because we're not going to get that time back.
That's right.
That opportunity,
And I was also very impressed by how you found out about this need, because in 2012 you were volunteering in Zimbabwe. And obviously in New York City we have better, I don't know if I can say better medical system. Yes, we do, or resources.
We have all the resources and knowledge. We have a lot to pull from.
But what is the major realization that you had when you were there?
So that was in 2012. Now, I've been doing this for most of my nursing career, working in hospice care or oncology. So I've been seeing end of life, and I've started to write my work and my outreach about the education piece probably 2 weeks into being in that field. So long time before I got to the Zimbabwean hospice. But I will tell you that I know that I have the resources as a hospice nurse here, meaning I have the medications, I have equipment, and it still wasn't going well. So I thought, okay, so we need to do the education piece, we need to talk about it. But then there are countries that don't have the resources that we have here, and they still have, obviously, end of life. And in Africa, in Zimbabwe, they had about the average age, I think, of a woman is 42. And sometimes there were 7-year-old children taking care of parents. And I knew they didn't have as much resource, obviously, than what we have. And so I really wanted to do some volunteer work for this group. And then they said, you need to come. You need to come over there. You can go out with the nurses. You can stay with the medical director. And I thought, that's like an opportunity that will not be open very often. So I went over, and it changed my life forever in so many different ways. But you go there and you see that people are hungry. So the basic needs are not being met. But yet, what the hospice was doing there was taking a neighbor and training them on how to care for the neighbor and their family that was dying without resources, but they trained them of what to look for. And so what I call it is that supportive presence. holding the sacred space. This is what I teach. And I thought, okay, this is making, when I came home, I just reflected on that trip for so long. And the word doula is a Greek word that means non-medical person that gives physical, emotional, and spiritual support to another. That's what it means. And I thought, we use doulas for babies, for the birthing of the babies, and I've always made that connection of preparing for that life coming in, but we're not doing the same, and we need to for that life going out. And so doula, I think, is a very positive word, but that's really what was happening. And so, again, go back to the families being so overwhelmed with this fear of death and taking care of their loved one, not knowing how. If you named some area of care, specialized area of care for end of life, and now I have elder care doulas, that it's a separate person that can come in and hold the space. And again, if you think of the labor of the baby, that is very intense and can be very stressful for that maybe 10, 12 hours. That's really what it looks like at the end of life too. There's called this transition, and it can move very quickly, and then our patient passes. And as much as we think we're ready, we're not. So I thought, why don't we have these independent doulas trained? And I'll train people. I'll make this program based on what I learned there from this country that does not have the resources and basically is down to not a lot. Had a wonderful concept, and it goes back to simply being a human being and being skilled in how that looks. And death is a natural part of our life's journey. So if you think of that as a natural part, we can know what we can do to anticipate. But I always say we're so lucky and fortunate because we have the additional resources. We have medication. So if we team it up with these doulas, and then we have resources, and maybe we can send back some help to Zimbabwe, we can bring this thing full circle. It's pretty neat. So they taught me a lot.
Very beautiful.
Yeah, it was. It is. And again, it built this program that has just taken off on its own and is, going global. Because we are global in this end of life need. Whether we're on Fifth Avenue or whether we're on dirt floors in Zimbabwe, that looks the same at the end. And we need the same support at the end for our families and our patients. So it's very cool. I like it. Yeah.
So, Suzanne, I remember there are 3 important questions to ask. In level 1, when I'm taking your end-of-life doula training, I learned that the first question is, are there any safety issues?
Yes.
The second question is, are there any acute issues? And then about the support system.
Olive, you got it. That's great.
So can you give us an example of how that works?
Sure. I always tell my classes and people taking the training, if you remember these 3 questions throughout the journey, you will be amazing at helping somebody or being a doula. So safety is the only thing that I don't negotiate on. And I don't like to be a stickler because I think that we have to remember it's very important to picture somebody who might be feeling end of life, the control of their life has been lost. I mean, that's really what it comes about. And so when somebody comes in there, even with good intentions to help, but starts telling them what they need to do, we have to be very sensitive how we do that. And I know we have good intentions, but so safety is not something I negotiate on. I negotiate on everything else, but I can't have somebody at risk. And so how I do that is I'm a little, I'm creative on how I accomplish that. Meaning if I have a patient who is not safe at walking, and yet to tell him you can't get up can be devastating to someone's dignity. But if I explain it in a certain way that is really truthful and makes sense, that, right now we're going through a very difficult time, which is true for probably him and his whole family. And if you just happen to fall and break something or even get hurt, it would make it so much more difficult that let's just err on the side of safety and, use these kind of precautions. And usually I'll get, okay, I'll get that kind of if I present it that way. But again, it's making it simple for the doulas to remember. So safety is not negotiable. And there's 2 things I always point out with safety that are really important. That somebody's ability to stand or walk can change in a day. And somebody's ability to swallow can change in a day. So where somebody was okay yesterday, you always have to be assessing that. Can grandpa stand today? And you don't have to make it so overt, but you want to be aware that these are things you're checking. The second one we call are acute issues. And acute issues are something that's sort of jumping out at you that needs to be dealt with right away. And something like nausea might be. Pain is an acute issue. Mm-hmm. So when I say I don't negotiate on safety, that definitely is not negotiable. I'm not big on negotiating about pain because I want somebody's pain to be at least down to a 3 or 4 on what's called a 1 to 10 pain scale. Because if somebody's pain is controlled there, they might be able to eat more because their nausea might not be present, because if you have a lot of pain, you can be nauseous. You definitely will be able to have visitors eat more easily. You have more of your quality of your life. So again, this is about education, because some people will say to me, well, I don't want to take my pain meds because I don't want to be sleepy. And that's very justified. I understand that, but let's talk about that. So I don't want people to just refuse taking them and be in pain. And again, it goes back to control. I've had a lot of patients too who will not take the pain medicine or medicine in general, because that's something they can actually control. I know. And it's kind of heartbreaking. It's kind of heartbreaking because it's to their detriment. Let's get to the bottom of why you don't want to. And so then we talk about that. So those are acute issues. And then the third one is, what support system? And this is really important because that usually changes throughout the journey. Hospice is the area of home health care that takes care of end-of-life patients. And the way that it runs is that if somebody has a diagnosis and prognosis that is 6 months of life to the end, if it follows its natural path, they can be on hospice. Mm-hmm. Do you know what the average median? So the median at 50%, the lower half is about 18 days that people are on it. I have a patient last week who was on it for 5 days. He died at 4 in the morning. So we're getting patients on very late in the game. And so the support system is really important because the caregiver, this is really important to point out, that the caregiver is the family. That hospice comes in and teaches the loved ones how to care for their dying patient. If you only give me a few days and you have that fear that's at a level so high, they cannot hear what I'm teaching them. It's overwhelming. So the whole thing is very important about who's the support system, knowing that there are doulas that you can hire out there, having people take the level 1 training ahead of time. The time to take it is before anyone gets ill. Mm-hmm. So that this is a skill 100 years ago that was handed down generation to generation. Grandmothers more were handing it down to the grandchildren. And people were dying and they were at home. But we haven't seen that now. People are living so long. We're so far removed from it. It's become this, what does death even look like? And let's try and avoid it at all costs.
Right.
So the 3 things are, what are your support system? Because you might have a loved one come in that gets 2 weeks off from work, but then they're gone. So I always say, okay, so who do you have? Because I want to preserve my main caregiver. And if, let's say it's a husband and wife, and let's say the wife is taking care of the dying husband, that can be really, really physically, emotionally draining. So if there is somebody that comes in, we need to give her a break. And I really like if we can make the wife, not having to do all the tasking, all the caregiving, and still be the wife watching her dying husband. This is the last time they have. So if I can delegate, then I love to do that. So I pull from all resources.
So
Community.
The doula comes in and he or she is a person that can see it clearly. He might not be related to the family, but he can see, okay, it's kind of like a coach, like the team player. You need a break, you go.
Absolutely. And we're objective. We're not coming in there with emotional ties. We're coming in there with a wanting and a willingness to help, and with immense knowledge of end of life. And when you walk in to a fearful situation and you're calm, it changes the energy of the room. And my patients will sometimes look at me and say, well, why isn't she scared? So maybe I don't need to be scared. And it starts out our journey really beautifully together. But objectively, I can say that person's exhausted and they're going to, have a break. And I like to set up a system where it's rotating, because you can't keep doing this day in and day out. I've had people that don't sleep and I see them go down and then they get sick. And it's not the way that we want that for anybody. So we really want to have it as a balanced situation as best we can.
Wow.
Challenging, difficult. We're working on it, though. We're getting there. Yeah.
And I imagine a lot of people that are coming in to visit, they are still in the shock
Yes.
phase, and then maybe they just found out, and then they show up like, oh, what happened? So you keep having that kind of energy, and it's such a important thing for everyone to be on the same page.
It really is. And
whether they're 3-member or 10.
Well, and here's the thing, it's the person's journey who's dying. So what's great about if I can have time with my patient is when they're in that stabilization phase, that middle, so everything has sort of been, they're on the program, we've gotten all those acute issues down to a minimal, and it's what I call the highest quality of what their daily life is. And it's a magical time because it's a time where the conversations can be great. And I can have a time to ask them, who do you want to be here and what's important? And, I've been in so many situations where the person knows they're dying, the family knows they're dying, but they don't talk about it together. And so we're missing an opportunity of getting real with each other. And we're missing an opportunity of maybe having a conversation that we need to have. But it's very important, like you say, who needs to be there, and this is your show. And so at the very end, do you want a room full of people? Do you want the neighbors from down the street? I have to tell you that most of the time the answer is no, that I don't. I just want my mom and my daughter or maybe the doula and a couple other people at that last sacred time. And I want it to be your way. So, we need to talk about that. And right now it's, I just found out that, Mr. Miller, and I'm going to go over there, and sometimes it's a little chaotic. Yeah.
I see.
Where it's not the time for that.
There are so many surprises that could happen.
Yeah.
Wow. And also you don't know how long that time is, so you would really want to just treasure it and have that conversation. I remember learning about how important it is to have the one-on-one conversation, because if the son and the dad wants to mend whatever issues that they had before, they're not going to do it with a whole room of grandkids and
they sure aren't.
friends.
And this is our last opportunity. So I'll tell you that I have not found one person in life in general that does not have somebody they can forgive and forgiveness that they can ask for. Not one. That's because we're human beings, and we probably have quite a few. But in a family situation, I've had so many times that people have had problems within the nucleus of the family. And when somebody is ill and on hospice, what we normally do is put the patient's hospital bed, because they do need a hospital bed, in a main room so they can be part of everyone and everything. But again, you're not going to have a heart-to-heart when you have 15 people there, especially if, you want to break down a little bit and get real with somebody. And I use the father and son because that's probably one of the most difficult connections I've seen for people to say I'm sorry and the I love yous. And it's so vitally important. So to ask people to do those little 15, 30-minute alone time, and you don't know how long you have, because there's going to inevitably be a day that your patient goes into what's called a deep sleep. And it doesn't always happen this way. I know there's more for me to see, but I've seen everything from somebody who I thought was doing great, this little lady who was wonderful with her vitals and everything. And I remember saying to her, and we'll kind of talk about some of the spiritual elements, I remember saying to her, I'll see you next Tuesday. And she went, and I remember walking away and thinking, what was that about? And she died 2 days later. It's almost like sometimes they know.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't want to assume that, because in the stabilization, if I can help you to manage your symptoms so closely that your quality of life is really good, which is our goal in life in general, then we sometimes forget we're having such a great time having conversation and getting present, because people put their phones away, they come from out of town, and they really get present with their families, and we're just so busy. Inevitably one day that's not going to be an option, and so we don't want to say, well, I have time, because I don't want you to miss that opportunity. Very important.
That's so true.
Yeah. And even to say thank you to somebody. I kind of think, what would I want to say, to somebody? And I want to thank them for what they've taught me and for being part of my life. I think that's what we're here for, is there's lessons of all types. Some are really tough and some are more obviously light, but everything has meaning. So, thanking somebody for being part of your journey and and letting them go, saying goodbye, allowing somebody to go, and knowing that, you're free to go and I love you, and, that it's okay, really does a lot at the end. But you have to get to that place. So if we're dealing with not talking about it, we can't jump to, saying goodbye. We have to work through the program a little bit, and that's what doulas help do.
Especially when you ask someone, why didn't you talk? Why didn't you two talk for the last 5 or 10 years?
Yeah.
And then they're like, yeah, we had an argument. What was that about? I don't remember.
It happens all the time. Because what I'll do is I do something called a life regression, and I teach the doulas, and it's that wonderful thing just to talk about, and your patient wants to do that because they want to do, it's like an organic thing that almost happens. I love to ask about their childhood and their brothers and sisters, and you always get, something like, oh, well, but I don't speak to that one. And then you say, well, what was that about? And they have no idea. And then you're like, wow, well, don't you think, wouldn't you want to know? I mean, is it okay that, I think we should call her? And after a while, they usually say, yeah. And then that person usually runs to the bedside. And it's so beautiful that you feel, why didn't we do that, 10 years earlier? Mm-hmm. So I really learn a lot from the work that I do about life, not just end of life.
It is to remind ourselves to celebrate life.
Every day. And not sweat the small stuff, I mean, really what's important. And I've come to realize that time is our most valuable commodity. It is not, I would like a really nice, beautiful, big apartment with a terrace, but I'm teasing. But the thing is, it's your time because it's not guaranteed. And I've seen people taken away I've had patients that were 5 years old. I have people in their 40s, and that resonates with me because I'm in my 40s. And you don't want to say, I didn't do such and such, or I had a fight that we don't remember what it was about. You want to learn from that. And they'll teach you that. They'll kind of give you that wisdom at the end, which is really incredible. And it was incredible how it was from different religions that they were telling me the same type of things that were really important. And I thought, there is something really incredible happening here. Whatever input they're getting is the same, no matter what their background or religion was. So we're all really connected on one energy level, especially at the end. So, and now we think we're not, but we are. So it's important to know that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. The way life is set up, it's so easy to forget so many little things that are super important.
Yeah.
And at times like this, you just all connected.
Everything goes out the window. Yeah, it's just human to human. It's just heart to heart, soul to soul, and nothing else matters. And there's something really magical about that. And I tell this to my doulas and everyone who's been in the situation to have the privilege to be with somebody at end of life. I talk to them about how time seems to be different than we know it in right now. It just melts away, and we're just sort of together. And you don't know what time it is, or you lose track because you're just doing, but there's something about the energetic, and they go, yes, you're right. I do. It's not like, it's afternoon or morning. It's way different, and it's really special. Yeah.
A New York Real guest, my friend Tony Florial, he's all about that flow state. Mm-hmm. So it's as if right now, like just you and I talking, I feel like I can only see you and hear you, and we're so deep in it. And I think that is a really important moment for everyone to have one another human without interruption.
Absolutely. And so one of my sayings is I've seen more good work done in the last 6 months of life than the last 30 years because the person got sick. And because everyone came together and put it down. And you know what? You can be in a room with somebody who's on their cell phone, who's checked out, and we're kind of tapped into everything, and it's heartbreaking but now, and people will say to me, my cancer was like the best thing that happened. And they say, I know that's going to sound crazy, and I know that's not a fit for everyone, but they say because it allowed me to get close with my family, it allowed my sister to come and us to have the conversation that we needed to have. I learned things. I stopped being in the clouds. And so, let's pay attention to that while we're healthy and able to capitalize on it, because we have our health, which is so valuable. But if these people are telling us, let's pay attention to that, But I think it's fantastic, and there's an irony in it. Yeah.
Suzanne, I think you told me before that you receive letters or feedbacks from your students or the family.
Yeah.
And can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. I get emails periodically from people who've taken the courses. And the beautiful thing is that most of the emails are from people who didn't have anyone that was sick, never thought they would be using it, but yet and usually it's the one-day level 1 workshop that gives and all the tools. So I had this one beautiful email that it was so powerful because it was actually written at like 1:30 a.m. The woman could not wait. She traveled to her grandmother, and she starts out the email with saying, I just, traveled 600 miles with my daughter to see my grandmother, and she just chronicles how she was of service to her through the workshop, doing a healthcare proxy and knowing it was her wishes and it's okay to die, and giving her daughter the gift of knowing that life as we know it in this physical body does come to an end, and how we can be of service and honoring her wishes. That was a really important thing, because again, I really want to stress that it's the person's individual journey, and that we really want to love is doing what they would want. And so, because sometimes if people have not talked about it, it can get into a sticky place about, well, I want this for mom, or I want this for mom. And I see a lot of family fights before it's at the hospice level. And that is never a time where people should, have arguments. Mm-hmm. But if, again, if we've talked about it, if somebody says, well, if it comes to that at the end of my life, I want to be home and I want to be cared for, and that it's okay. So having her write this letter and not even waiting till she got some sleep, but she did say at the end, she said, I will sleep very well tonight knowing that I did all these things. And then another one that was just recently was a woman who took the workshop in her 20s. Now, I have people all ages who come to this, and there is a section that are in that 20-year-old, and I think that is just incredible because they're the future. So this woman wrote me, and she said, I had no idea that my grandfather would have a stroke, and I've been by his bedside for the past week, and I'm using what I learned and the tools, and we've kind of stayed in contact for those few weeks that she was with him. She said, I could never have done that before. And since you talked about it and everything I'm seeing with him, I mean, it was right on point, and it was just so powerful and empowering. So just getting one of those emails makes me say, we're doing our job. This is so powerful. But if we can do that for a lot of people, then even better. Yeah.
So you do have a training coming up, right?
I have multiple things coming up. So what's now exciting for me is that there's a few things that are kind of taking off with this. I'm getting calls from hospices, from medical centers that are hearing about this end-of-life doula training and saying, can you bring that level 1 to our community? That's great. That's a beautiful marriage, because they're the ones that are taking care of people. So what we're saying to communities is, we care about you, and we want to offer you this training if you want to do on how to be a caregiver for your loved one, to make it that much of a smoother journey when we are called, which inevitably we will be. And then the other thing that's very exciting is, it kept dawning on me, Olive, is how do I get to the people? How do I get to, we have so many people in this country, even the world, how do we get to the people that need the care? And so I said the home health agencies. People want to be at home. There are the home health agencies. Why don't I go to them and ask them if they'd like to look at this training and have it be part of what they offer? And I just signed my first franchise, and there's talks with a whole bunch of them that I think will launch probably about 6 to 8, which is going to happen in the next few weeks throughout the country, and then it will just go bigger and bigger. And that's really exciting, because that one woman who owns that franchise, has 200,000 people in her service population.
Wow.
Incredible. So we're going to train doulas within her company, and they're going to be part of the service that she offers. And again, it's getting the word out. And part of that is that they offer the level 1 to the community. So we're supporting the community with the level 1, and then they have doulas that they can call on. I mean, it's very exciting, and it's really moving really fast.
Really,
and there's always the online
that.
course as well. Yeah.
Yes. I really appreciate the fact that I think level 1 is by donation.
Yep.
So there's no excuse of not.
It was so important to
taking
me that everyone knows how important I feel about this and how important it is, that to not put a monetary price on it. So please, if you can donate something, great. If you can't, great. But please, if you're called to take it, because it really is so powerful with how your journey is going to be affected by the skills. Again, I'm just giving them back. And, you know, again, connecting us all and wanting it to be global. I mean, I have people who've taken it from other countries, and I can't wait to go deeper into that to be helpful and to connect us. But, you know, this is something that shouldn't have a price on it. You know, it just doesn't make sense to me.
It used to be passed on by grandma.
Correct. And it's a human skill. And, you know, what happens is some people donate and it just kind of takes care of it. And then the level 3, that is people who want to do it as a practice, so that has a fee. But the level 1 just should be a global outreach, as it is. You know, the people in Zimbabwe taught me it, the concept. I paired it with what I know. And together we just offer it to the world. Yeah.
I hope my New York realers who are watching this
Yes.
will consider it, because there's absolutely a need. I
Yeah.
mean, there's no way they wouldn't one day realize how helpful it is to know this.
And it's uplifting. I mean, it does. I do talk about certain things that are difficult. It's so difficult to imagine saying goodbye to somebody. But there are some really cool parts to it, and we'll probably go into a couple of stories at the end that make you say, wow, you know, life is an amazing journey, and loving each other is an amazing journey, and not taking that for granted. So even if your followers share it with other people that, you know, Olive did this show, and maybe you guys want to check it out, because people who are kind of drawn to it, but they need to know about it. So yeah, let them share.
When I first started level 1 training, I had my headphones on. I'm doing it online. My boyfriend was in the same room, and he heard, I was
He said, what are you doing?
I couldn't believe we're actually talking about it like that.
Wow.
It was like, okay, I get it now. This is so close to home.
Yeah, yeah.
We all have, you know, grandpa, grandma, or a friend, or someone that passed away that we didn't say a proper thank you or goodbye to.
I know. Well, sometimes we don't have the time. But I think the thing that's really nice about the online program, too, is that people can tiptoe into it.
Yeah.
They can stop it for a while. They can have the safety of their home if it's something. But if you're not called to take it, then you don't need to take it. But I have to tell you, there are people out there, and that's why that book went so fast. Number one, so fast, because people are like, thank you. Somebody is talking about this subject. So people are really hungry for it because they know it's a natural part.
Yes.
And it's a privilege to be in the position to share the experiences and how it can be so much better. And it really can be. Yeah. Yeah.
So there are 3 questions that I have prepared to ask you.
Okay.
Suzanne, if you are to FaceTime, Google Hangout, or Skype with a 20-year-old Suzanne, what would you say to her?
20 years old. That's a while ago. One of the things that, you know, I'm taught every time I work with somebody something about life and how precious it is. And I think that just the way that our bodies work is that when we're in our 20s, especially at 20, you're kind of focused on you, that it's about me. And then as you get older, it's really a we. I really feel the connection with so many other people that we're doing this together, that we're connected. And if I was Skyping with her, I would tell her that you're not going to believe the direction that your life's journey takes, and that it will be bigger and more fulfilling than anything you could ever conceive right now, which is really the truth. I mean, it's such a privilege to work with people and to be able to be educating and connecting globally, maybe getting services for people that don't have access to them. It's probably the most powerful place that I can ever imagine being, and I feel really, really lucky to be here. So I would tell her that, you know, keep doing what you're doing, but stay open to what the universe is going to put in front of you, because I think that's for everybody. I think the universe does open doors, and it's up to us whether we acknowledge that the door is open and it's the right path for us.
So from the me to the we.
Yeah, from me to we. Yeah.
What did you want to do at the time?
I was always into being somewhat creative. So I was at that time doing singing, and I had write songs and do that whole little, you know, MTV was big at the time, and I was on Club MTV, and so it was very different than what I do now. But it was fun, but I think it still had that creative angle to it that I wanted to always be very authentic with where I was at the time, and I love that. But it definitely was a, you know, more of a self-absorbed sorry, but I think that's what you do at 20. But I was writing songs, and I just didn't know. I was staying open. But I always remember doing some kind of little volunteer work, which I think was so important, that resonated inside me, that I always had that, you know, that inkling that there is something so much bigger that's connecting us all. And, you know, you get back so much more than you give when you volunteer or you do something. Yes. I mean, I think we should all do it, and I have no shame saying that. So I always say to somebody, go out and do a little volunteering somewhere if you want to really feel connected to the bigger picture. Yeah.
So for the near future, is there any volunteering opportunity with what you do?
There's just so much volunteer work. We have what I tried to set up as a tier of a system that would, because we have over 78 million people that are over 65 in this country. Now think of those numbers, 78 million. 20% of them do not have children. So now we're talking about huge numbers, and usually it's the adult child that will help to take care of the dying parents. So we have this huge bracket of not only elder age, but of people who don't have children. So setting up 3 tiers of doulas. So one, giving the caregiver training to everyone, to caregivers, but also to empower communities to have a volunteer set of doulas within their community. So whether it's a religious group or a senior center or wherever it is that you can find them, I'm going to say to you that I'm going to come or give this training for free, and I ask you to get a little group together, that because inevitably there's going to be somebody who does not have resources or didn't take the training. And if you can step forward, and even a couple of hours a day really dramatically helps them. And then you have your level 3 doulas, who are the ones that are for hire. But I ask each of them, and we've done this before, that if there is somebody who is dying that can't afford services, can we each donate a few hours, and we kind of rotate. And that's how I see this in a 3-tier kind of system working out. And so, yes, there's plenty of volunteer options.
Okay, I'm interested.
Okay,
I'm gonna ask my New Year realers.
Yes,
yeah, we should all be a part of it.
You should, and you know, the level 1 is not overwhelming. It's a basic skill that was handed down generation to generation, and just being able to sit and what I call hold the space next to somebody who's at end of life is tremendous honor, and also it really does a lot for them. And not being afraid of it, and not being afraid is by talking about it and knowing what to expect, and it doesn't have to be scary. So yeah, let's get that together. I'll be happy to teach it.
Suzanne, I'm very interested to know your tips on health, wealth, love, and happiness. These 4 areas. I always get some hints from my guests.
Okay. You hit on something that I have been working on since I sort of gotten in the field of nursing, and also working with end-of-life patients. And it's translated a little differently in how I present it, but let me share with you, because it is about balance. And balance is so very difficult and challenging. And I think that we're so focused with doing, that we really don't even take time for ourselves. And I've seen people become really sick from actually overworking and all that great stuff. But I want to talk about energy and science for a minute, because it's really interesting when I've given my talks and I've shared some of the experiences that I've been privileged to be part of. people might say to me at the end that that's really a great story and it's really nice, but can you prove it? And I said, of course, I'm just sharing with you what maybe happened or what somebody shared with me that was dying. And then it dawned on me, I can't prove it, but can you prove that it didn't happen? And so that was my first thing. But then I went and studied a little bit of the energetic field, because there's definitely something happening there. And the balance that we talk about, it turns out that our bodies are an energetic field, and they actually are made of 4 different bodies of energy, which are your physical, so that's your health, your mental, your spiritual, and your subconscious, your emotional. And if those are not equally nourished and fed and balanced, you become out of balance. And when you become out of balance, that's where you don't feel well, where your health gets affected. Let's talk about wealth for a minute. Yes. We're living in a world where wealth there's a lot of importance put on that. And yes, it is important. It's wonderful. There's nothing wrong with it. But is it what I perceive and what I've learned from people that are at the end of life to be very important? No. However, I have talked about, wealth is an abundance of something, and usually it's about material things. But I often tell people that I've walked into some of the wealthiest houses that had nothing materialistic, but their families were so connected and loving and present that I was in awe of it. And yet they had maybe a small little house with nothing to speak of. But they had this overwhelming wealth to me. And so I love that. So I want to make sure that we understand the difference that's taught to me between fulfillment and achievement as far as wealth. And those are 2 different things, except for I think we have reversed, because we're all focused on achieving. I think that we're young, we're taught, go to school and get degrees and become this and get that big house and the car, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's funny that people that will get to those marks will say, but I'm still empty. Why do I feel empty if I'm the vice president of that company and I have my house, and why do I feel not whole? Because they're looking for fulfillment, and we're all looking for fulfillment, and fulfillment is actually giving yourself to someone else without attachment, and which means there's nothing that you are getting back. You're not getting paid for it. It's not a family member. You're not required to do it. You're just giving a kindness, a service, just being kind to somebody, and there's this sense of fulfillment that you get, and that is the golden ring. And so if we can understand the difference between achievement, there's nothing wrong with achievement, but know that we're really looking for fulfillment to feel whole and complete and connected. And that's been taught to me by the people leaving. And it's been all different religions, all different backgrounds. There has to be something to that as they're taking their last days on earth, why they're sharing this wisdom, this insight with me. And that's why I'm sharing it with you, because it's so powerful. So.
Fulfillment.
Yeah, fulfillment, and it comes from just giving of yourself, doing something kind for someone else. Yeah, really neat.
That's for wealth.
That's the wealth.
We can get wealthy very easily.
And it doesn't cost anything. It's free. You just go out and do it. And so, really that wealth is an accumulation, a huge abundance of something. Why not have it be of this good feeling? And so when you talk about the balance of happiness, of love, that all comes into play, because I love the people I'm working with. Love is not just a relationship one-on-one. I love my pet therapy dogs, and I love my patients and their families. We become close so quickly with this common kind of energetic connection of just wanting to help each other through this passage that's very difficult. But there's a lot of love there, and it stays. Yeah.
So we covered wealth, love, health, and happiness.
But the balance is a challenge, and the balance is a big challenge for us, how we live our lives and how we're told to live our lives in today's society. It's almost impossible. I'm constantly reminded that if I work a 15-hour day, I'm a better person. If I do 17 hours, even a better person. And how many times can you keep that up? Or should we? Or should we, have a balance with that and say it's okay to go? I always would say that I'll put my working on myself last, because I'll do my work, and then of course you never find time for that. But it's so important to keep in balance, and so now I practice what I preach, and I see lots of people that have gotten ill, and they will talk about having been out of balance. So it's really important to know that we need to nourish and feed each part of those 4 elements that you said and the 4 bodies of energy that I said. And they require different things for nourishment. So, yeah.
And it's fair to say that as we're growing and growing older, they will change too.
They absolutely will, and stay open to that. One of the biggest things that if I can a takeaway from this is that the mental body of energy is your rationalization, which can talk you out of almost anything. So your spiritual body is your intuition. It's that gut instinct. If you follow your gut instinct, you will never go wrong. However, you might be getting this feeling like, oh, I should be taking this course, but I have no idea why I should be taking this course. I have no interest in this topic that I know of. But go with that gut instinct, because a few layers later it will reveal itself why. But the intellect can say, you don't need to take that course, you don't need to waste $400 on it, and then you're not on your path. So know that your energetic field and the universe has your back and will open up opportunities for you that will bring you to that fulfillment if you stay open to it. So it's so important to just trust. Yeah.
So thank you for being on New York Real and being in the beautiful Central Park.
Yeah.
What is your most favorite memory of New York City? You don't have to pick one, you can tell me a few.
I have so many. I remember coming here. I went to high school in Westchester, and then we moved here, and I went to 2 years here. And well, I think that, when I was at my senior year of high school and just going outside and knowing that there was so much culture and fashion, and seeing, Francesco Scavullo, in a store around the corner from me, and know that there were literary people having lunches talking about their books. The whole world seemed open to me. So I can't really pinpoint one favorite story, but I will say that, it was a really wonderful time for music and for the arts and culture. And there were some good clubs and parties and dancing. And New York has such a place in my heart. And I have not been in New York. I got back to New York this year, but I had been out of New York for about 15 years. And people always talk about it like, why aren't you living there? Because you talk about it like you love it so much. So I just think that the diverse culture and even the population, seeing so many different levels of people, and knowing that from the perspective I have now, knowing that we're all connected and in this together, it's just a beautiful place to be. Because like you said, you could go out, I can go out my door, and I just wrote an email to somebody. I could go out my front door and get connected and do volunteer work 2 streets away, because there are people that need it. And if you just want to stop for a minute and pay attention and maybe, do something kind, and even having a conversation with the girl who was 24, even just asking her how she got on the streets and what her name was, I didn't have to give her anything. She was so happy that I was just talking with her, because everyone was sort of walking by. So it's there for us. So New York is a pretty dynamic place on all levels. Yeah.
It's true. And sometimes we see so many people, we kind of block everyone out
I think
on
you
the subway.
I think you have to sometimes, but I think you have to remember to open it again. Because it was interesting, when I was passing her, it was one of those hot summer days. I was just getting back to the apartment, and I was like, okay, 1 more block, and I walked by her. And I remember turning around and just taking a minute and looking at her, and I went back. And so initially I was in my zone and checked out and just wanted to get out of the heat. And it made a huge difference. It made a huge difference to both of us. it started me on a different path about finding resources for people where they can stay, because I didn't know of any.
Right.
And I remember her just watching me go up the block with this look on her face that I think touched her, that somebody just spent a minute with her. So, yeah. So, to remember to just check back in.
I remember being on the Long Island Railroad when I was a little bit younger. I don't know why I didn't have cash, and they're not taking cards, so they were gonna throw me out off the train. And a girl was just like, I'm paying for her, and she paid like, it was like $12
Wow.
for my ride. And I said, give me your email, I want to pay you back. And it's just, don't worry about it.
How beautiful
Someone
is
had
that?
done this for me.
I love it.
Yeah.
And it's like if we each did, I always talk about if we each did one little nice thing, just one little kind thing. Think of the world. If we each just took a minute, and we can. I just think that we've got desensitized to all the stimulation, and it's very challenging out there now. There is so much negativity, and it's hard. I mean, financially it's hard, and if we just even held a door open or asked somebody how they're doing, it just makes a different energy.
My friend just posted on Facebook, somebody held the door open for me today.
Yep.
It's a special post.
I know. I think I started this thing called Random Act of Kindness Fridays, and it started to kind of work, but then and I want to get back to that because I think people are happier on Fridays. So I was like, if you can just do something like nice, like open the door or give somebody a flower or a compliment, we can start like getting that on Fridays all over. It's just like, if that could catch on, it'd be really cool. But I know it's post-worthy that someone held a door open. Come on.
I was thinking about Mondays because I'm a freelancer, so I work any days.
Right.
And Monday is actually a day that I love because it's the beginning. It feels like the beginning of the week, but people are usually kind of stressing about work and only Monday. But we can do something fun on Monday too.
We sure can. I mean, I hope we can get it through the whole week. But it is interesting because when I used to work, Monday through Friday, nursing job, I mean, everyone is crappy. Monday morning comes, but Friday, hello, good morning. So I thought maybe we'll kind of go in that way and work back to Monday. But I agree, every day should be utilized and special because you know what, we're here. We have an opportunity to look at this park. Central Park is incredible, and that we're sitting doing an interview. It's pretty, on a Monday. It's Monday. Is really cool. Yeah.
Thank you so much
for
what you do.
Thank you.
And for sharing with us.
Thank you for having me. You do amazing work, and I'm just so excited to see where you go with your all your fields. You're going to be wonderfully successful. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Suzanne. This is the time when we go into each other's camera. Crossover.
You're looking for a higher love inside of me. The world